Welcome to another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am your host, Hector Colonas, and today we're going to dive into the week 32 2026 recap. I am joined by an amazing guest co-host today, Sagar Marabia. Sagar, how are you?
I'm good, Hector. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little bit tired, if I'm not going to lie. I am calling in from a very dark Sydney, Australia right now. Where am I finding you? Where are you calling in from?
I am calling from a very bright and sunny California right now.
Yes, I did have to explain to my son yesterday why I was calling him and it was nighttime here and it was daytime there.
Yeah,
So that's going to be a very interesting conversation this weekend when I get back home. So I
okay.
am in Sydney, Australia right now. I did attend the Flex Workspace Australia conference yesterday.
Nice.
We did some keynotes, did some conversations here. Lots to kind of share with what I'm hearing in the Australia market. But we'll dig into that in a second. We have a very good episode and a very jam-packed newsletter this week. If you want to follow along and click on the links we're going to talk about, head over to thisweekincoworking.com and click on week 32 of 2026. This week's episode, game, newsletter, everything is presented by Yardi Kube, and they have borrowed us for a little bit of time. The fantastic Sagar. Sagar, tell us, for folks who've maybe not had the opportunity to cross paths with you just yet, how long have you been in the co-working world?
I've been in the real estate technology space for almost 20 years now. I've been in the co-working space for a little longer than 5 years now. My transition to co-working started in 2021 with our engagement with WeWork, and since then I have deepened my roots into everything co-working at Yardi, and I'm responsible for product engineering and services for all our co-working solutions and some of our commercial portfolios as well.
That's amazing. So you are the person that knows everything that is working at Yardi Cube and also what is coming next, right? I think you are the perfect person to quiz about some of those things.
And also one of the important responsibilities is to know what's not working. So yes,
Yes, I didn't want to bring that up, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
totally get it as a technologist. So we're going to talk about a few topics this week. We are going to talk about your new release this week, where you're introducing a new level of interaction for Yardi Cube customers and their end customers. We're going to talk about an acquisition in Africa. We're going to talk about this convergence between managed suites, landlord flex, and what that all could mean for us, as well as a case study from a direct booking platform. We are going to touch a little bit on some UK data, and then we're going to round it all up with what does connection look like in a hybrid world. So let's start at the top of it all. Yardi Cube has introduced its first AI agent that is customer facing. It is the Yardi Cube sales agent, a very big trend now for a lot of platforms to start adding agents on top of it. What is the Yardi Cube sales agent and how does it help operators today?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I jump into that, let me just share a little bit of context here, right? So it's,
Please.
we all would agree that it's a fascinating moment for the co-working industry, right? The headline numbers that you discussed last week and the week before, which also came from Co-working Cafe, they look calm, right? So US inventory is inching towards 10,000 spaces, and which is approximately about like 2.5% of the total office portfolio within the US.
Mhm.
I was in London a couple weeks back, and in speaking with all the operators, realized that the flex industry over there is at now 8%, right? So on paper, the
Mhm.
growth is there, it's steady. But underneath, the business model is completely being rewritten in like three ways, right? I would say distribution is shifting, and and there are so many such instances where the demand is coming from channels that operators don't control. The product is shifting, right? Because the managed offices and the landlord partnerships are growing far faster than the classic
Mhm.
co-working model, which is leasing the whole floor and then subleasing it to your customers. And
Yep.
then the operations is shifting, which is where AI comes in. And AI just moved, and I say just, but it's been a few months, moved from a demo state to something that's now answering inquiries. It's adjusting pricing at like 2 a.m. in the morning. It's also taking action to complete a transaction end to end without any
Mhm.
human involvement. So My honest read, and the growth story is fine, but the operating discipline, which is the story here, is where the winners and losers will get decided in the next few years, I would say. And I think that's where I am watching most closely at Yardi, because 5 years ago the question every operator was asking is, how do I fill this desk? Today they're asking, how do I run this as a real business, right? And so, like, pricing, channels, AI, landlord deals, the industry is graduating from that growth story to an operation story.
Hmm.
And I would say, so it's absolutely a good time to be in this tooling business. Yeah. and and with the RD Cube AI, we've launched a sales agent which now allows our customers to run their sales team 24/7. It's an extension of their sales team. There was an article that I was reading which said, a company in UK analyzed that 60% of their inquiries came after hours, right? And being able to handle those inquiries and closing some of those with a transaction just increases conversions considerably, right? So
Yep.
that's what our goal is, where we are building this AI platform that is connected to the Cube platform and the data
Hmm.
that sits in it, and gives our clients the ability to complete entire workflows end to end.
Hmm.
Looking for a private office and being able to see it on a map or see the photos of that private office before you can say schedule a tour and I want to be there tomorrow, right? And it also
Hmm.
goes through all that data that sits in the underlying system, driving the conversations to where you can have your next board meeting in Miami next week for a 10-person
Hmm.
conference room with a rooftop lounge, right? So that you can have a happy hour after the board meeting.
Hmm.
So in essence, that's what AI sales agent does for.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I do think that we're gonna increasingly have conversational booking experiences, and it's definitely something we're seeing across the board. I was talking a lot about AI here in Australia with a lot of operators. Just a hat tip to the operators in Australia. Fantastic products, very premium, but also top of mind for them is, how do we respond faster? How do we close conversions overnight? How do we fill up our event spaces without overloading our staff members? So it's a logical addition to what is already a very good all-in-one product. My question for you though is, Yardi is very much known for taking very strategic or well thought decisions. And so there must be a lot more that's happening behind the scenes with regards to how your AI works, right? When it comes to like how it's governed, how it's kind of guardrailed. Tell me a little bit more about that, because I don't normally get to speak on the podcast
Yeah.
with other technologists or people who actually write code and build product. So tell me a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes with the sales agent, for example.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked this question because, again, to draw an analogy from what you just said, with my experience in London last week, a couple of weeks back, we have clients who are hiring external agencies to write, AI workflows on top of the systems that they use, right? Yes, the tools are there today that allows you to build functionality very quickly. But how do you track it? How do you audit it? What happens when it breaks? How do you know when it's breaking, right? And so at Yardi, we've taken this long-term view. We started building our Virtuoso AI platform almost 2 years ago, and we spent a lot of time understanding how can we build this platform in a way that it's not Yardi controlling everything how your AI works. It's giving you the tools, or our customers the tools, to design how their AI works. So we are largely anchoring our platform on three things. One is agents. So we build premium agents that Yardi builds, but we also build technology around how our clients can design their own agents while conforming to all the data integrity standards, the governance, the security, the data model that comes with
Mhm.
Yardi Cube already baked in. They have to worry
Mhm.
about their secret sauce and not the technology and how it will work and how.
Mhm.
The second is we build assistants. So these are co-pilots. These are assistants within our various apps. Similarly in Cube, where, instead of their staff asking questions or going through videos or, reading pages and pages of documentation, they can quickly ask AI how to do something, or
Mhm,
if they are learning a new system because they're being onboarded and, there's a new rollout, they can do all of that very quickly. Third
mhm,
thing, building connectors. So we are very close to launching a Claude connector where, again, it follows all those rules via MCP tools that Yardi built,
mhm,
so that our clients can just use the LLMs that they use today. You can go to Claude.ai, you
mhm,
can start typing your query or your prompt, assuming that it has access to all the underlying operations data in Cube, and then
mhm,
we have written the rules and the connections and the logic and the security, which will then feed it back to Claude, and then you can, create whatever dashboard, whatever report. And
mhm,
we have seen clients who have created uh, presentation ready reports directly from their prompts connected
mhm.
to our underlying databases. So these are the three ways we are growing our AI strategy. And then amongst all of this, there is also native AI functionality that is being woven into every product. So within Cube, if you want to find out, where is your revenue leakage, right, and detect that, or what is this lead being scored as, or what is this members
Mhm.
360 view, and what is the health of this member, that there is a decline of some sort before cancellation notice comes in. So
Yep.
these are the themes that we are focusing on natively within the workflows as well. And these are the four things that will continue to advance as we continue to grow our AI roadmap.
I absolutely love it, and I could definitely do a podcast with you on each one of those
I
verticals.
know, right?
But I just want to ask you, so your MCP and your connector, is that Claude only, or can I bring any scaffolding I want to the MCP?
We are launching with Claude first because that was our first partnership. Shortly after, it'll be ChatGPT and Copilot as well.
Yeah, because there's another conversation we've been having a lot here in Australia is everyone is excited about AI, but they are very, very wary of things becoming going from per seat pricing to utilization pricing, and also what will tokens cost a year from now or 2 years from now. Just on that topic, I'm assuming that your AI agents and your AI functionality outside of my LLM usage on the MCP, that's included in the licensing fees that I have. Is it still the same flat kind of flat fee licensing fee, or is there kind of talk of utilization fees down the road?
Yeah, for now, it's all part of the licensing fee. We'll have to, it's a wait and a watch thing, right? Because
Hmm.
what's happening is with quantum computing, it's assumed and it's expected that the compute cost is going to go down very significantly. And so if
Yep.
that happens, then, everything can be folded into a SaaS fee. But if you
Hmm.
see HubSpot today, right, they have a licensing fee and then they have a usage fee on top, right, for the AI
Yep.
features. And we are not there yet, from an industry standpoint or even from a Yardi standpoint. But that's certainly an option that we may explore
Yep.
depending on how the compute cost advances.
Yeah, completely get it. I think just on that note, the benefit obviously of having it all within one system is you've got less egress, right? You have to load up less context and less information, use up less tokens when you are using a system
Exactly.
that is already kind of built that context layer. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how you roll out that. But let's dive into some of the news, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty. So probably the biggest story this week is a major acquisition over in Africa. IWG has announced the full acquisition of Wojo from Accor Hotels. Accor rolled out a brand or a sub-brand called Wojo across 186 locations in Africa. They have now signed a definitive agreement to pass those over to IWG. As folks probably know, IWG is on a tear right now, really vacuuming up as many brands and networks as they can to really try and substantiate themselves as the world's largest co-working provider, which they currently are. But what's interesting from this piece is Accor's exit from the co-working world. Accor has been investigating and interested in the co-working world since around 2014. So to see them be like, yeah, we're gonna split ways is a very big sign that I think we shouldn't sleep on. If a lot of the world sees hospitality and co-working as a very similar industry, for Accor as a multinational global hoteling group to say we're out of this is something we should probably look into a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you've been in the co-working world for about 5-ish years. You've been in the property world for about, you said, 10-ish plus years before that. Are you seeing acquisitions from where you sit? Is it something that is on your radar?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of consolidation that's going to happen in the industry, right? So if you look at the overall supply in the market, top, I would say 10 or 15% has, 80% of the locations. And then there's a long tail of these smaller
Mhm.
operators, regional operators who have a secret sauce, right? So we'll see that kind of consolidation continue to happen in various, parts of the world as, these bigger companies continue to go into different markets. So that's the first thing. Second is, the acquisitions like, what IWG did, or, even the franchisee model. So Vast, which
Mhm.
is, one of the largest franchisee of co-working brands, is also a
Yep.
Yardi Kube customer. And they acquired three brands, right? So
Yep.
VentureX, Office Evolution, and Intelligent Office. And so that might be another model where,
Mhm.
either a private equity company or somebody comes in, a brand company, and starts building these businesses.
Yes.
And then I would say the third would be just organic growth that will also, like, these specialized co-working spaces where you see pods, and the pods company, which IWG again acquired Jabberbox a few years
Mhm.
ago. And then there are other such companies in this space. Could
Yep.
be, multiple things that pans out. And yeah,
Yep.
it's an interesting time to see, how all of this unfolds in the next 2 3 years.
Absolutely. And I was speaking to a bunch of the sales teams at the vendors here in Australia
Mm.
as we watched this acquisition activity. And we're like, well, we're going to have less and less buyers, right? We're going to have less and less clients and bigger projects for these clients. It's going to be very, very interesting for both the operators who are competing in the space, but also the vendors who are trying to support this industry. But you did mention Vast in the podcast section of the newsletter this week. I did sit down with Vast's brand new CMO. It was only announced on Monday. We released the podcast on Monday, US time, with Chris Basto talking about why he joined
Mm.
Vast from Industrious and what he's excited about this franchising model and what Vast is on. So go and find that in our feed. It's a fantastic conversation, just digging a little bit more into the Vast conversation from someone who's coming in fresh from Industrious into the franchising world of co-working. So definitely go listen to that. Taking a step from Africa, let's go a little bit north. We'll go over to the UK. You were there a week ago or a couple of weeks
Weeks.
ago. You were having a lot of conversations about kind of this managed office and landlord flex convergence. I've been having conversations here. We had a landlord panel at the conference yesterday talking about whether they see flex as an amenity, whether they see flex as a partnership, whether they're investigating or investing more further in their own solutions. And then we also had a piece from Flex Day, a kind of case study that they shared about a landlord who turned on kind of what were the conversations you were having in the UK around this idea of this convergence?
Yeah, Hector, if I had to pick the most under discussed story in Flex now, it is this, right? The fastest growing part of our industry isn't coming organically from these co-working operators anymore. It's landlords with their vacant
Mhm.
spaces. And I think most operators haven't fully clocked what that means for them, right? So I think there was recently this JLL and KIT data on central London, right? And
Mhm.
what's fascinating is, like, between 2020 and 2025, so 5 years, serviced
Mhm.
offices, which is the classic that grew 20%. Managed offices, can you guess? 580%.
Wow.
It's like nearly 30 times faster. So
Yeah.
London Flex is now about like 20 million square feet, and a quarter of all the Flex transactions are managed deals. And this is, it's not just data, but I'm, in the conversations with our customers, they confirm
Yeah.
this. Almost all their growth, they are seeing it as managed deals. And the
Mhm.
average managed deal is, 6,500 square feet.
Mhm.
And so it's not just London, like, it's happening globally. So I don't know if you read about SmartWorks in India. They
Mhm.
just flipped to profitability. Because of
Yep.
WeWork India ties, I track it very closely. And the enterprise clients are 92% of their entire rental,
Mm.
right? IWG, as you said, added 800 centers last year. 95% of that growth came from partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that landlord owns the risk, right? And then these brands, run it.
Yep.
Office, another player out of Asia, right? They crossed 5.5 million feet of managed offices.
Wow.
So it's happening, and so you may ask, why is this happening, right? And it's
Yep.
it's basically just landlord economics. JLL,
Mm-hmm.
the JLL data, I think it said it's like reducing vacancy is driving 60% of the landlord interest in the managed space. So if you are a
Mm-hmm.
landlord sitting on a part of empty building, waiting for 2 years to get a traditional lease where paying rates and services charges and managed floors that starts producing income in 90 days is attractive,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Comparatively. And I've been having a lot of these conversations with our global brokerage services where their occupier clients and their CFOs, finally did an apples to apples math. And they said, when I come to you for a space, don't just show me the traditional space because it really doesn't matter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Headline rents look cheaper as compared to flex for traditional leasing. But when you add service charges, the fit outs, the other costs, all in, flex often wins if it's anything under 3 years.
Yeah.
The capital and demand both are pushing in this direction, and I think that's why I moved.
Yes, it's very, very interesting. And as I said, I've been seeing in many conversations with execs here, especially this week. And even here, where supply of space is constrained, this demand for managed turnkey space from global operators who want to come into the Australian market, we're seeing in the US, they want to just have a space that is fully managed. They can come in, turn it on, the operator is the service provider, the landlord is the landlord, and we're increasingly also seeing the landlords becoming that service provider. We're seeing the Tishman Spires, the Heinz of the world, really exploring how to like dig in and like really service that managed side. And the numbers you shared are fascinating. This is something that we can't ignore, and I think a lot of operators have to figure out if this is where the growth is coming from, where do they sit? Are they going to become a service provider? Are they going to become more scalable? Are they going to kind of improve their systems so that they can scale and provide this service level that these managed buildings are requiring? It's going to be a very interesting, I think, rest of the year.
The operator of the future is increasingly a service brand on someone else's balance sheet, right? The
Hmm.
lease arbitrage model, sign a 10-year lease and sell it monthly, prey on occupancy. That's what got us in trouble in the last cycle.
Yes.
Partnerships and management agreements, share this risk. So, but here's the part that nobody talks about, right? These deals live and die on the back office. Means is
Hmm.
like management agreement means you are running someone else's P&L. You need multi-entity accounting, right? Revenue share
Hmm.
calculations, owner statements and landlord asset management, like all these things, which works precisely because hotel management companies mastered it. We all like to
Hmm.
talk about Marriott doesn't own hotels, right? It's the same concept. So
Yep.
Flex is learning that discipline right now, and frankly, spreadsheets will break at building number five, I would say, right? And so
Yes.
so the right tools and technology for that is also going to be super important.
On the topic of your visit to the UK, let's jump into some co-working cafe data out of the UK. They shared that UK and Ireland have just passed 4,968 flex operators or flex locations across the territory. Very interesting numbers. It is up and to the right, slight growth. We are seeing some consolidation as well in the UK. We did share some pricing data as well in the newsletter, so definitely go and have a look at that. What I do see though, the top UK brands, they're Regis, Fora, Bruntwood, with Dublin being led by kind of Pebber and Iconic. So definitely go and look at that data set as well. Did you feel when you went to London, is there that overwhelm of operators in London, or did you spend your time just speaking to only your customers when you were over there?
No, I definitely felt that the density of flex spaces is much, much, much higher in London, right?
Hmm.
4,700 flexible workspaces, 4,400 are in UK, right?
Hmm.
Approximately 300 are in Ireland.
Yeah.
Number that jumps out is the concentration, right? Greater London has 25% of that UK inventory, which is, approximately 1,300 spaces. So that's
Hmm.
roughly 10 times Manchester, which is the next largest market, right, at 128. So if you
Yes.
compare that with US, right, the top city LA has 350 out of the 9400 10,000
Yep.
locations that we have. So UK is fundamentally a different shape, right? One
Yes.
gravitational center and a long tail, right? So I
Hmm.
think and the pricing data, as you said, is where it gets real fun because the spreads are enormous. That the
Yeah.
data. What are your sense on the pricing data and the spreads there?
I do love the fact that there is a growing number in outside the city because I remember seeing a couple of years ago when Manchester and Brighton and Bristol started growing in their numbers that the spreads got wider and everyone's like, "Oh my God, the price is coming down in the UK." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's just more locations outside of that core." But as you said, there is such a concentration in the UK within London and the London surrounding areas that it is just gravitational right now. It is just absorbing and pulling up those averages, but just a fascinating market. And yeah, you really hit it on the head that it's 10x more locations in London than in Manchester. But also, I didn't really do the correlation over to like, yeah, Manhattan has what, 300, 400 locations, I think,
50 almost, yeah.
and compare that to 1200 in London, like
London,
it is a completely
yeah,
different market.
yeah.
Um, I do challenge Co-working Cafe to go do the same study in India, though. Like I am fascinated by the Indian market and the concentration and density there. Obviously, a completely different market, as we you mentioned a bit earlier, very much focused on that managed suite, that turnkey, that
Mm.
very large floor plate. But I would be very, very curious to look into what does the numbers look like from, let's say, a Bangalore or uh, Mumbai, for example, or Delhi to a London, right? And I always laugh when we see, the world's largest co-working market in Los Angeles does this thing, and I'm like, the rest of the world is so much bigger. But let's actually look at the numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's where the growth story is going to come from, right? Which is the major cities. There is some, and then it's the tier two and the tier threes that are going to drive this growth, right? So we see
Hmm.
Indianapolis in India in US being one of the examples where
Yeah.
it's leading the growth, and again going back to the previous point, like there is spread in pricing across all the inventory types, whether it's monthly memberships or day passes. But what was very fascinating is even for something like a virtual office, I think the UK median was 95, 96 pounds, something like that.
Hmm.
But Liverpool, in the same expensive market in the country, is at 175, right? And then Cardiff and Bristol were at 35. So that's a five times spread on essentially the same product, which is a
Hmm.
business address, right? It doesn't even have to be physical, right? There's no such dependency. So
Yes.
it tells me that the flex pricing is still widely inefficient,
Hmm.
and I don't know how much money is being left on the table because the right technology is not being used to determine this pricing, and it's no longer
Yeah.
just based on the occupancy, but it's also based on the broader market.
Yeah, I did do the deep dive into dynamic pricing 2 weeks ago, and it is definitely one of those things of a lot of people are just pricing on what they think people will pay and what they have historically paid, not based purely on A, what is happening in the rest of the market, and B, what is actually happening in the rest of the economy. And we see that once again, bringing it back to Australia, where the sun is now coming up. You We're seeing this flight to quality, of course, but we're also seeing this ability where people are looking for more economic options now. They're price becoming more price sensitive. They're trying to figure out, everyone has a premium offering here.
Mm.
How can I get as much premium and as much feature functionality for less dollars is definitely becoming part of that equation. And we're going to start seeing that in a few other markets as well. So having that price elasticity where you can go up and down, increase the volume, lower the price, or increase the price and lower the volume so that you can maintain the service level that matters to your customers is going to be
Yep.
one of the most important conversations that operators have to have with themselves or with each other over the next couple of months to figure out how do we ride out this price sensitivity that is definitely coming into the market
Hmm.
as some of the larger leases start to come up for renewal across many of the major CBDs.
Yep.
I want to dive into one more topic with you before I let you get back to your day, Cigar. So Greg Miley over at Clockwise, he put together a post talking about how, looking at a survey of 100 UK employees, why people are coming back to the office. They're looking for that human connection. They're looking for that connectivity with their team. Of course, I believe in that, but as a technologist, I'm also like, what does it look like? How does tech enable that? Because for a lot of times, people used to come to the office and they would put up with the frustration of the door access doesn't work, or I couldn't get the day pass that I wanted, I couldn't book the desk that I wanted, I don't know who's in the office, I don't know what time it opens and what amenities. Where do you think technology will sit to make these connections more enjoyable, more hospitable, but also less effort on the operator side?
Yeah, no, thanks for, bringing up this topic because it is also very top of mind, not just for us, but for also our customers. And when I say customers, it's not just the co-working operators, but also the building owners, right? And there's a convergence happening here as well, here,
Mhm.
right? But now here's why I think it matters more for the flex than anyone else, right? When the presence becomes a choice, every workspace is competing against the strongest incumbent in the history, and that is a member's home office, right? Like,
Mhm.
that a spare room with a desk and a good lighting and zero commute, right? Employees are
Mhm.
preferring now. They are saying no. And so you can't beat them with desk density and faster Wi-Fi and coffee
Mhm.
and all of that. Like you beat it with things that can't be replicated at home. And it's the belonging, it's the shared momentum, it's serendipity, it's learning. Just recently, we have over the last 12 months, we have had a lot of our large enterprise commercial building owners saying, hey, we have this vacant space and we are going to operationalize this as a co-working space or as a flex amenity for our tenants in the building. We want to use Yardi, but then we also want a singular app for all the tenant employees coming into the building so they can request their amenities from the app, they can invite visitors from the app, they can, submit work orders from the app, and then book that co-working space in my building or in my network of buildings. And then also, if they're traveling and we don't have presence anywhere, they can go to one of our partner buildings, right? So again, so we launched Work Cafe to address that need, but that goes on to say that this co-working operations, traditional commercial buildings and operations, those two worlds are converging, and
Mhm.
technology plays a very integral role in terms of how these tenant employees, how these end users feel when they come into the space, and then the ability for them to see who's going to be in that space, when are they coming in, so their commute is more intentional, it is more collaborative, it is more outcome driven. And then
Yep.
similarly for the operators of this space, it is important to know who's coming in, how many conference rooms are being booked, and is it being booked with other colleagues, or it's just the individual by themselves, did they actually use it, how many guests
Mhm.
are
Yep.
and getting stats on all the usage data and trends, whether it's through Wi-Fi, whether it's through sensors, whether it's through the app usage, is going to inform how they design their spaces so that it's more collaborative and communal going forward.
I remember yesterday when I was on my keynote, one of the questions was, when do you know technology is working? And I'm like, well, the best technology takes the most complex, annoying parts of running your business and makes them feel like magic. And so, Sagar, thank you for you and your team for creating magic and everything you're doing at Yardi Cube. Thanks for joining me today on the podcast. I look forward to having you again as a guest in the future. Look forward to geeking out with you some more in the future as well. Thanks very much for joining me and take care.
Thanks for inviting me, Hector, and I also look forward to having many more conversations with you.
Fantastic. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.